Good evening and welcome back to the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts Dominion Energy Jazz Cafe, the virtual series. Last week, you joined me with Valerie Cassell Oliver as we talked about the very impactful song, Strange Fruit, its history, the man who wrote it, the woman who first sang it, Nina Simone's covering of it, the impact of Strange Fruit and images like Strange Fruit in music and in visual art, and the history along American history, along world history, as movements arise and impactful art is created. Today, I am so warm to be welcoming Jeremy Winston of the Jeremy Winston Chorale. I've been talking about him around here for quite some time. And I guess today is the day to reveal not only is Jeremy one of my favorite musicians, he's also my cousin. And I don't think Jeremy's ever heard me say, he's my cousin who stole my career and put me on the path to this one. Jeremy is a singer, he's a conductor, he's a composer, and he's just an all-around bright mind. We share a lot of similar interests, very similar journey to where we ended up. And I'm very proud of the musician that you are, Jeremy, and I'm very happy that you get to be a part of my experience here. So before we get going a little further, Mr. Winston, would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. And first, thank you for that very, very kind introduction. That's an interesting way to put it. I stole your career. Listen, we inspire each other, man. I love what you're doing, and so happy and proud to call you family. And but thank you for those very, very kind words and gracious introduction. I've been in music for some time, mostly in the higher education and performance arena, so to speak. I started off as a chair of the music program at Wilberforce University, Ray Charles Chair for 9 years, and I went to Central State University and was associate professor there for 6 years over the choir at both of those institutions respectively, and had a great opportunity working there. But then I also created and started my own ensemble, the Jeremy Winston Chorale International, which is a nonprofit organization. And what we do is we travel the world really as ambassadors for outstanding music, with an emphasis on the heritage and history of African-American music culture, but bringing together the great musical choral tradition that spans everything from classical to spirituals to gospel to jazz to R&B, and even trying new things. And so it's really a great honor to be able to continue my work in music in that area. And I also do some performing as a classical tenor. I studied voice and did all the arts, arias from operas, all those types of things. And from time to time, I do some performance in that area as well.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Jeremy and I, some of you get a little bit of context about who we have been as musicians together. We've had the opportunity to perform together a couple of times. I think once in North Carolina when we were at Ernie and Sheila's, and just family getting together, having a meeting as we do. And I don't know, you brought your keyboard or I brought mine. I don't know, there was a keyboard there for some reason and you got to playing and I got to singing it. Until then, we performed that day. Your grandfather made it right. Good job of performing that. Another time was at my mother's second wedding. We performed the prayer together.
Yes.
I was supposed to sing it with Mama, but she was getting married, and you were in the room. And so the two of my favorite memories of sharing.
No, I remember that. Oh man, yeah, those are some good times. And the prayer, that's one of those classic songs, man, that everyone sings these days. Yes, indeed.
Use our Italian diction and our pipes.
Right.
And I could go on all day long reminiscing with you and talking, but we're here to talk about jazz today.
Yes.
So Jeremy, would you share with us some of what you know about the birth of jazz, about how it comes together? We know, and I've been talking about it, brings together blues and ragtime,
right?
To create a new genre. New Orleans is attributed with giving birth to this American Black art form, music. Right. What can you enlighten us about in the 1920s, 1930s, and what leads up to what becomes jazz?
So jazz to me is a great cross-section, an artistic cross-section and an artistic snapshot of this country's history, and all of it, all parts of it. It's the creativity that comes out of it, but more so than not, especially from an African American experience, it captures the egregious side of the egregious nature and history that this country has perpetuated on one culture, specifically African Americans. Jazz is an outgrowth of necessity, and I've always been intrigued by this idea that some of the greatest artistic and creations and contributions have come out of a place of necessity, of poverty, of environments where you had no other option but to create with what was given. And I think the Black experience speaks to that on so many levels. I can go down so many rabbit holes about just that alone. I mean, I'm going to go down one little brief rabbit hole if you allow me. And I would recommend your viewers right now to look up the history of paramedics and the EMT. Paramedics in America was actually started from the Black community because they could not trust and rely on law enforcement to come help someone who is in need in the moment. Anyway, and so they created their own system of getting people to the hospital, which was born out of a necessity, again, out of the egregious history of this country. So is jazz music. Jazz music it has its roots. And even before we would ever defined it as jazz music, it has its roots in the slave tradition, where slaves were given very little to create. I mean, it was mandated by law that they weren't allowed to be taught to read, and this extended into music as well. But yet, music was in their bones. Music was in their hearts. Music was a part of their soul, right? And so, when they were given instruments of a little more of European tradition, like the violin or the piano and so forth, not being able to read, they still had the opportunity to create. They created music that oftentimes came from things that they heard, maybe through church, through their slave masters, or just melodies that were part of the community and so forth, and they made it their own. So they would take a traditional melody or a familiar melody to their community and make it their own, improvising, making things up, and out of this became a musical tradition and a familiarity of what we consider now, what we hear, starting off more closer to the blues, right? And even probably prior to that, the spiritual work songs, right? So while slaves were working in the field, they sang to lighten the load, and the work songs often reflected the type of work that they were doing. So you have anybody will check out chain gangs and cornfield hollers. These are songs that reflected the type of music. So they would holler because they're in the cornfield, they're far away from each other, so they had to sing loudly for everybody to be able to participate. Or even row songs. They're slaves who would be in a boat, and the songs usually were slower, but the tempo and the whole tenor of the song reflected the type of work that they were doing. All right, I know I'm going a long way around this, but I think it's important to capture the idea and the soul of the nation and the heart of the individuals to understand how the music came about. And so as they continue to progress throughout time, this kind of creative force that came from within, that wasn't taught by any book or anything. It was just the nature of music and understanding that experience that they brought with them from the western shores of Africa, emerged into what we now have, the blues, right? And I mean, after the spiritual, then the blues came about, and we started to hear that to be a major component. And then after that came, when we start to get into the 1920s, after slavery was abolished, and then the Great Migration, where people moved from the South after the Civil War to the North, to Chicago, to Philadelphia, to New York, to DC, and to Harlem specifically, where we started getting into the 20s, where the Harlem Renaissance came about. They brought these musical traditions with them, and began to really spread throughout the country this great new style of music that so many people were unaware of. And also, what is very interesting is around this time is we see the advent of the radio. So, I mean, it's almost like a lot of things kind of came together at one time. The intersections came together where they were able to distribute, not only were they creating the music, but they were able to distribute, and the world, not just America, but the world was fascinated, said, what is this? This is amazing, So I've been going so many different directions on this. But one of the primary, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I love it. Keep on going. Don't let me
keep on going. Okay. I just let me know. Just cut me off if you want. If you want to kind of get to some other points here. But it's amazing for me. One of the greatest attributes, because I had to skip over a lot of just other things. Otherwise, we'd be here for 2 hours. But the enduring principle, musical principle that emerged out of all of this was and still is improvisation, right? And again, it goes right back, and that's really the thread that I was trying to attach to all of this. Again, you go back to the idea that slaves were told they were told they couldn't learn to read, and that extended to music. So they had to create on the spot. They had to, as we say in the church tradition, let the Spirit lead, right? You know, it wasn't, they couldn't go off a page when there was no page to go off of, right? They had to go off of the tradition, the oral tradition of what they were taught. And it's amazing. We can even see this today in the Black church, which probably is one of the more enduring institutions from this time. The Black church, where there's still styles that are different from different regions. Like you can have the same song, you know, like I think of this song, Glory, Glory, like the Baptist, and I'm at the piano. So, you know, if you're a Baptist, and I may play this wrong key, you may sing Glory, Glory like this. Glory, glory. Hallelujah, since I laid my burdens down. Glory, glory, hallelujah, since I laid my burdens down. Right, and that may be like you're the bad, but then Adventist, you and I grew up in Seventh Adventist, so in the Adventist tradition, we sing it differently. At least where I grew up, Philadelphia, we would sing it, how we do it? Glory, glory.
Yep, there it is.
Hallelujah, since I laid my burdens down. Glory, glory. Hallelujah, since I laid my burdens down. So same melody, right? And this is what the oral tradition does, where we have similar things, but they're presented differently. And that's the great, and that's another form of improvisation, where we take something similar and we create something new. And that is the essence of jazz. Sorry I went all around there, but that is the essence of what jazz brings. And in the 20s, it really came to life, because not only did the Great Migration happen, where all these freed slaves from the South begin to go north and take their traditions with them, and everyone's like, oh wow, the radio took it out. But then they started to form. This is when you start to see jazz superstars emerge, right? This is when you see Louis Armstrong come on the scene, who really changed the idea of what jazz could be from a strictly blues, a rhythm and blues idea, something very straightforward, to where you have a soloist, a person who takes a solo, and that becomes the meat of the song, and where they're just improvising, where it's different every single time they play it. Same song, but every time they play it, it's going to be something different. And then you have, Duke Ellington now, and then we have the big bands, right? And then now they're going out, they have these swing bands that are really, used for parties, for dance parties. You got a band, you got Lionel Hampton, you got Cab Calloway, and this is the boom of all of this. And it's still rooted in this idea where you take a simple melody, and then you have an opportunity for people to improvise off of it. And it just took the world by storm. And even consequently, this wasn't limited specifically just to music. During this time, we have the Harlem Renaissance, which during this time in the 20s, the Harlem, which was like a 3-mile radius, had over 175,000 African Americans, which was the most one neighborhood concentration of Blacks in the world. And we started to see a great emergence, not only in music, but in literature, in painting, in art. And that was the center of American culture, emergence of American culture, of course, which kind of got halted in 1929 when the Great Depression hit. But but jazz still was a very driving force behind all that.
I'm thinking about growing up in this family the way that we did, Eva Mae and Ali Mae, being big figures for me, for my life, my great grandmother and my grandmother, for those of you who don't know Eva or Ali. And I remember learning from them and from my mother in the oral tradition. They would teach me stories about music, about food, and about history, and about family, and about the lives of slaves, even as I was going to school, in this country, and not learning anything about those things in school. And I think as a child, I didn't think about the benefit that I was receiving from this oral tradition.
Right.
comes out of poverty and necessity, as you explain. How do you think, in a more overall sense, stories like yours and like mine impact the education of youth? I'm thinking particularly about you being a man who's gone through the HBCU experience. I never went to an HBCU, and I'm wondering how much of that you see reflected in the education experience there, or just in education in general, being an educator yourself.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I really take great pride in what HBCUs have done historically. I went to Oakwood University. Well, it was then Oakwood College when when I was there, but now Oakwood University, and participated in a lot of the kind of traditional things they have there. The Oakwood University Aeolians, that has really kind of grown in fame and reputation as an outstanding choral ensemble in music in general. And I went to school with their current director, Jason Ferdinand, who he and I were there together and studied under Dr. Lloyd Mallory at that time. And so, and also just knowing the rich history of music that existed there, with Take Six coming out of there, and Little Richard studying there, and Brian McKnight coming out of there, and Shalea right now, who's an outstanding musician, Steve Mackey, who's doing a lot of education in music, and I mean Eric Griggs works with Dr. Dre. I mean the music contribution of Oakwood University is pretty unique, but also is the contribution to African American advancing the culture of that the HBCUs have provided for a long period of time. And for me, it's an important experience, and it's an important story, because I think we all, I mean, even if you went to HBCU or didn't go to HBCU, as African American males, we are continuing the legacy and we are part of the same history that we talk about when we talk about 1920 jazz. When we list the names off like Cab Calloway or W.E.B. Du Bois or even Martin Luther King or Malcolm X or Medgar Evers, and all of these, we are an extension of this same history and how it drives America forward through art, through education, through community building, and through just legacy sharing. And it is a humbling thing to be connected to this rich history. And so for me, it's exciting. I love to kind of make my contribution through music, obviously, but making sure that not only are people in America aware of this rich history, but people abroad are aware of this rich history. And that's what's so exciting about being able to travel overseas, because they are genuinely interested to experience and know about this great musical tradition, and so I just feel blessed to be a part of it, and blessed to kind of carry the torch during my few years on this rock.
I want to give a shout out to a friend of mine, a fellow musician, used to be in Richmond. He's up near his home in New Jersey, Dr. Lynn Atkins. I have conversations with him sometimes. Coincidentally, he and I studied with the same voice teacher long before we knew each other, Faith Esham. I love Faith. But Lynn, whenever I talk to him about a project, I'll say something like, I need a conductor to do the Rudder Gloria or something. I don't know if I'm going to use it. He'll always say, take the podium yourself.
Right.
For him, it's important to see more Black faces, but more Black men in particular. And for his journey, more Black gay men, for Lynn's experience on the podium themselves in leadership positions. And so I think about that every time I think I'd like to do something. Who am I going to get to conduct it?
Yeah.
Why shouldn't I be the one who gets
You should be the one, right? You should be the one. And, and it's amazing, it is important that we push back against the kind of, I don't want to use this term stereotypes, but just the norms that we've kind of set for ourselves, right? This country has set for ourselves that, if it's going to be quality, high, it's got to be this, it's got to be this person, it's got to be that person, it's got to look like this. And, I feel like we can break down those norms and establish new ones, right? I mean, and it's uncomfortable. I mean, when change happens, people are uncomfortable by it. People get upset, but you know what? They get over it, and time moves on. And I want to be a part of that shift in the narrative. So my kids and my kids' kids can no longer, it will no longer be a big thing to say, we need to put more persons of color, we need to put more women in position, all these types. That battle has been fought, because there'll be more battles to fight in their generation, I'm sure.
And we covered last week, and we're getting this, and I'm loving that we're echoing a lot of the similar themes, and I think we will, as I look ahead at the way this, I'm hoping this series plays out. But Valerie talked a lot then, and we're talking a lot now about how it's the artist's responsibility, maybe, to capture and to archive and to collect moments in time, the good and the bad, the positive, the hurtful, the uplifting, and the devastating. But art has a unique way of tackling those subjects in such a way that it's still uncomfortable, but maybe easier accepted, maybe more gently felt than someone lecturing you about it. And jazz certainly has impacted the world by introducing Black art in a strong way to the history of the world, particularly in this nation and in this country. And we're still seeing artists take to the stage and to the streets to use their gifts and their ability. Just last night, was it? I think it was. I didn't get to go. There was a concert at the Robert E. Lee Monument here in Richmond. Monument Avenue's been under some fire for some time, and it's the last Confederate monument remaining on Monument Avenue here in Richmond. And a group of violinists, Naima, hi Naima Burrs, hi Lisa. They were there. Naima is played many concerts for me, and she's now transitioning into conducting herself. Beautiful with the baton in her hand. Mm-hmm. Plays that violin like nobody else also, but that baton. And her mother, Lisa Burrs, very popular operatic soprano. In fact, she did a concert with my mom on spirituals in February. I'm inspired still seeing these artists take their calling and create love to show the world and bring the world together. Jazz certainly has been a part of that. How, in your experience, have you found that your art does a similar thing? Brings people together or introduces something to a new culture?
Well, yeah, and that's one of the most addicting parts of what I do. So I've had a great opportunity to work with a couple of many go to many different countries to do concerts, but I have kind of an enduring relationship over the past decade or so with Czech National Symphony Orchestra in Prague and the EF Symphony in Medellin, Colombia. And among other, but those are organizations that I've been working with and I still do work with kind of on a long-term basis. And to me, it is no short of amazing that these individuals, when I stand up and, they hand me the baton, I'm standing in front of 80 people who obviously don't look like me, but speak a completely different language, come from completely different circumstances, in a completely different country, that we could have never had a conversation prior to this moment. All 80 of these people, we never had a conversation. All we've done is shared music. I sent them the music. I have my music in front of me, and I put my baton up, 3, 4, and then all together, on cue, we are all creating beautiful music simultaneously together. And I know
that feeling. I know that feeling.
Yeah, it is an indescribable kind of achievement of humanity where they don't care your beliefs, their religion, all the obvious divisions that we have created that we get so impassionate about and riled up about, just aren't even thought of in the moment. It's all about the art. It's all about the art and the communication and the experience. And so this is even before. This is just a setup, right? Then to have that as a backdrop, all that, everything I just described, as a backdrop, but then the art that is created is captivating and beautiful and emotionally driven by every participant, from the conductor to the violinist to the singers to the, and you've got a Black choir, a Czech orchestra, and we're singing total praise, right? And everybody is kind of pulled into the emotion of that. And they don't even know why they love it. It's probably not in praise to God, especially not the American Christian God that we think, but still there's a commonality and there's a community in music. And then you can switch gears and go to something else. You can play, a symphony, all these types of things, but we're all in agreement on that. And there's when this is to me is very important. I also want to add this other part. It's important to me because I also recognize that probably for a lot of these individuals that we're working with from different countries, the only image they see of African American males, probably besides Obama, is LeBron James, an athlete. Nothing against LeBron James, great guys, but the enduring image of African Americans around the world isn't generally a positive one. It just generally isn't. I mean, we're entertainers. We dance around the stage. We are known for with hyper violence, hypersexual, hyper, all the bad things, all the bad isms we could imagine. That's what the narrative has been about us. And so for me, there is something special to say, that's not the true narrative. As a matter of fact, we're quite special, just like everyone. We have special things that we can contribute to this world. And I hope for many of these individuals, I'm the first African-American male that they've ever looked at in person, that they've ever put their eyes on in person. There's some, going around Prague and going around Colombia and even these other countries I've been to, Russia and, in these far parts of, France and Europe where, just nobody's there. They look at you with just amazement, like, oh my goodness, I've, not seen someone like that before. And I mean, I think they have it. And so for me, I feel it as a real responsibility. Not mincing words at all, to be an ambassador for this community, this culture, to say that there's something uniquely special that we have to share with the world, and they love it.
I agree. I grew up in this family of ours, learning all about love, learning about how to respect and honor people, and learning to embrace the things about who I am and about who we are that make us special or unique, that give us something else that others don't seem to have. And maybe it's just openness. I don't know. Maybe it's having to come out of struggle. I mean, certainly growing up in poverty myself, I learned how to just be, in a world that I didn't otherwise know how to exist. It's been wonderful. You talked earlier about bringing people together with music, and it reminded me of the first time my hand dropped in front of a group of people to lead music. It was a choir, Black faces and white faces, and Latin American faces, Asian faces, and I dropped my hand only minutes ago, learning that I was now a conductor. I had no idea that I'd be conducting. Minutes before I dropped my hand, I learned I was conducting a tour of an orchestra. Frank had gone sick. You were in Messiah with him when he passed out, and he and I were doing a tour in a couple weeks, and I was not in the Messiah concert that you finished for him.
That was crazy. Yeah,
that was a crazy weekend, and I had canceled that tour, cousin, and I dropped my hand. The president of the university said, "No, you're still going." I uncanceled it, and you're conducting. The first time I dropped my hand, "Great Day" was the song. "Great Day, the righteous marching." That wall of sound I felt hit me for the first time was intoxicating, and since then I've been able to stop sharing in these ways.
Yeah.
Well, Jeremy, this has been a fascinating conversation. I would really love the opportunity to get to learn more about you as a musician. Would you mind playing something for us before we?
Sure. So, I was, so many different things I was trying to decide on direction to go for this, but one of my favorite just jazz tunes is the Nearness of You.
Wait, I gotta settle in for this. Hold on. I love that.
And anyway, it's just a beautiful melody, kind of haunting, and maybe hopefully will be an appropriate song to kind of end on.
can't wait until I can have an audience at these shows, because that deserves so much noise and applause and people on their
Oh,
feet. Man,
oh,
man.
it's fun. It's fun. That's one of my favorites. That's one of my favorite pieces, man. So I hope people enjoy that.
You know, um, as you played, I was listening to the way you used music, the way you went from one chord to the next, from one phrase to the next, even the way you decided to end your playing. It reminded me so much of all those musicians I heard as a little boy and the way they played. I mean,
Yeah.
the way you wrapped it up, to me, sounds like Laddie Bell playing for my mother in some church in Maryland or wherever.
Bell, yo, he's a great pianist. Great pianist, absolutely.
If I can get him
And
down here.
it's interesting to say that. My mother is kind of, when I hear my mother play, that's when I hear myself play. And I think, and I think this is what I was trying to say before. We're all a consequence or result of everything before us, and the people closest to us obviously have the biggest imprint on us. But we're all, I listen to a lot of people. I love, Oscar Peterson. I can't get enough of Oscar Peterson. I can't get enough. Even John Stoddard. Another great Adventist pianist. But my Alan Foster, another person that I grew up hearing play. But my mother, her chord structure. When I hear her play, I feel like, yeah, that's what I would have done. I would have done that. It's amazing.
Your mom once told me a story. I think the last time I was at her house, when they were in Durham, in that area. I don't remember why I was there. I don't remember why we were talking about music, but she told me that she began playing the piano out of necessity because her father needed someone to play for her. And so she really began playing because Uncle Charlie needed a pianist. And that is why I started playing too. Not for Uncle Charlie, but because my mom needed a pianist and I needed a pianist. And so I got to the piano and I got my fingers together and here we are. It was so powerful to me to hear Jackie tell me it was the same story with her.
Yeah. It's an amazing thing. Again, necessity, right? The parent, what does it say? Necessity is the parent of invention. That's what it is, yeah.
The mother of invention.
Mother of invention.
That's how that goes. Well, Jeremy, this has been a delight for me. It's always a pleasure to see your face. I look forward to the next family worship service Zoom call that we do. I think that's next week. And then going forward, for those of you looking forward to next conversation, we'll have Victor Brooks with us from the Victor Brooks Show. Samba Soul, great album of his. Check that out online. Victor Brooks is his name. He and I are going to talk about, we're going to revisit the idea of radio being an important developing factor in jazz and its growth. We're going to then talk about the rise of what's called the race record and unpack what that means, why it happened, why it was a necessity, and why in 1946 do we suddenly begin calling race records rhythm and blues? And how does that impact music in today's world? Jeremy, again, thank you. For those who tuned in to us tonight, this has been the Dominion Energy Jazz Cafe from the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts in Richmond, Virginia. You've just heard a conversation with Jeremy Winston. I'm Robert Phanord. Thank you so much for being with us. Have a great night.